Welcome to Real World, Real Talk with Dr. D.Z. Cofield. The show represents captivating conversations and insightful information to encourage and inspire you with all you need to become the best you can possibly be. And now, your host for Real World, Real Talk, Dr. D.Z. Cofield.
Welcome to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. D.Z. Cofield, and you're listening to your member-supported public radio station, your number one source for jazz and more, KTSU on the FM dial, ktsuradio.com, and wherever the app is located on your phone, you can listen live as well. I'm excited today to bring to you a continuation of the discussion that we started now 100 days ago, and that's the first 100 days of President Biden's administration. We talked about his Lift Every Voice plan for America, his very conscientious emphasis on helping African-American people and children of the diaspora in this country to achieve the American dream and doing his part to make sure that government worked harder to fulfill the basic promises of humanity and human dignity in this country for people of African descent. And now it's 100 days later, and we are going to revisit that conversation with our noted scholar. Now, just a few housekeeping matters before we get started. If you'd like to follow me during the week, you can follow me on Instagram at DZ Cofield. You can follow me on Twitter at DZ Cofield, and you can follow me on Facebook at, you guessed it, DZ Cofield. I want to send a special shout out and thanks to all of you who were supporters of KTSU during our membership campaign. Remember, there is no public radio without the public, and I especially want to thank those of you, our listeners, and specifically the listeners of Real World, Real Talk, who chimed in and donated. Some of you came in at the loyal listener level, some above that level, some below, but I want you to know your donations make a difference. And I want to thank you for continuing to support programming like Real World, Real Talk. I don't know if you caught the announcement that our general manager made that KTSU, in addition to our regular terrestrial platform, and now adding The Vibe, which is our R&B platform that starts at 8 p.m. and goes throughout the evening, but you can listen to it online any time of the day, that he will be launching soon a new talk version. And I'm excited about that. That should be really, really good to see and hear intelligent conversations that are not simply there to affirm somebody's already existing ideology, but to provide information and constructive dialogue to come to a sense of what is true and what is not true, and then help us develop a plan to move forward. So I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be a great platform, and I'm hoping and praying that Real World, Real Talk gets a chance to be part of that platform. I am excited to introduce this brother. He is a mentor to me. Man, I have so much respect for him and his scholarship. Dr. M. Tangalizi Sanyika has been teaching since the 1960s. He has taught at schools like Harvard, Brown, MIT, Dillard, and Texas Southern University. He has taught not just here on the continent of North America, but on the continent of Africa as well. 10 different universities he has taught and or visited at, and he is my resident go-to scholar whenever I have a need to talk to somebody about what's going on, not just today, but looking at it in its historical context. And I'm excited to welcome to Real World, Real Talk, Dr. M. Tangalizi Sanyika. Come on, join me in welcoming him to our show on today. Dr. M. Tangalizi Sanyika, I would say you're my brother, man. Listen, you're just a mentor to me, and I love you so much. Your lovely wife. Thank you for taking time to be with us on today.
Thank you very much for inviting me again, Pastor. And it's a mutual admiration society. I listen to you every Sunday when I can, And it's always an enjoyable experience to be within the sound of your analysis, not just your voice, but your deep analysis matters a lot. And I appreciate that. And when I can get a chance at 6 o'clock, of course, I double back and hear you doing a different kind of analysis. So I appreciate and enjoy. You are one of the distinguished voices in this country, I think. So
Well,
thank you for giving me this opportunity.
I appreciate it so much. All right. So first 100 days are done. President Biden had laid out several executive orders and visionary thoughts for this country. And now the first 100 days are complete. As we look back, you were part of the think tank that developed the Lift Every Voice plan. We heard people criticizing him. We've seen some now who have moved from criticizing him to actually surprised at the moves that he's made. We've seen others who were wholeheartedly locked in to President Biden, and they've moved now leaning towards the other side, having some criticisms. He faced a tremendous uphill challenge, and some are grading him very high, some are grading him a little lower. What are your thoughts as we look at these first 100 days as to what he has been able to accomplish, what he's been able to do?
Well, first of all, I must say, I am pleasantly surprised and cautiously optimistic, all at the same time. Pleasantly surprised because much of what he has thus far proposed and accomplished is far more progressive than many of his critics ever thought he would do, or let alone could get accomplished in public policy. And so it is pleasantly surprising to see him advance ideas that have long been identified with people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, to the left in the Democratic Party, if you will, its left progressive wing. Proposals that just got adopted, of course, the American Rescue Plan, which was a broad plan to revive the country's economy as well as to lead it out of the COVID crisis. And the way that he is focused on the human needs of people, especially people of color and persons who are marginal, also known as persons who are poor and lower income in this country, has been pleasantly surprising for all of us. The public positions that he has taken on the issue of racial equity and racial justice have been all very affirmative. The position he has clearly taken opposing white supremacy and white nationalism in this country, I think have been very, very positive. The calming effect that he has. Where is this sleepy Joe that everybody keeps talking about? He doesn't seem to exist. And if anything, it seems like it's an awakened Joe, as though something has arisen in his fiber that has just given him a new sense of life. He doesn't seem like he's my age, which is 78. He seems more like a younger, more active and more engaged president, that the Spirit of the Lord has come upon him, which is one way to say that. But I am pleasantly surprised, and I am, of course, overjoyed that he has moved aggressively the way that he has in all of the arenas. There's a lot to talk about as we will go along. But my first comment is I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm especially happy that he has restored, I think, a sense of decency in this country, a sense of normalcy, a sense of humanity, a sense of purpose, that we don't seem to be in that space we were in, that his predecessor had led us off into the deep end, the dark deep end. He seems to have brought us back to ourselves and to our senses. And his faith, I think, is a large part of that. But he's just such a genuinely human being, and you just feel his empathy and you feel his touch, you feel his love. And so I feel a lot calmer, but of course I am still very much awake and alive. And there's a lot that still has to be done, but he has accomplished things in his first 100 days that I never thought he would, and that I don't think many presidents have done in their first 100 days as quickly and as effectively as he has.
So let's go to his speech before Congress, that first major address that he made. I don't know what people were listening for or looking for. Tell me from your perspective, what your response is to that recent speech to Congress, and how do you think he handled things?
Well, first of all, I thought he handled it superbly well. His delivery and his content were just so superbly on target. I don't think he missed a beat. I think he covered all the major points, all the major things that were on the table, and sent a strong message to the American public that he will not be deterred by the naysayers, and that he will not be denied his desire to restore this country to a sense of normalcy and decency, and what it means to strive for a multiracial, multicultural democracy in this country. He made it clear that that is what his presidency is all about. And I think that was firmly reassuring to all the people in this country who are struggling for justice, for a sense of decency, a sense of fairness and sharing in this country. He made it clear that that is what his agenda is all about. He also made it clear that he would not accept anything less than that, and that his presidency was not going to be one where people could continue in the path of his predecessor, that was gone, that was history, that was the past, and would not be tolerated during his administration. He also let the rest of the world know that the isolationist position that this country had taken over the last several years has ended. That he's restored the Paris Accords, re-entered the World Health Organization, has refocused on climate change. I wish he'd have said a lot more about Africa and the Caribbean, but that's another subject matter as well. But I think he did make it clear that America will no longer be this isolated country that is just trying to be a verbal aggressor to solve every problem, but we will restore democracy, and we will restore diplomacy as the style of the world. But it also did something else, I think, and that is that it made the point to the whole of this country that, listen, our country is having some significant and very, very deep structural problems of the type that we experienced during the Rooseveltian era, perhaps even so during the Johnson era, and even so during the Obama era. And that his administration is very aware that we must do big things. We must go big. We must try to structurally get at these problems that have been plaguing us for so long. In other words, he wasn't just trying to sugarcoat them and dress them up around the edges, but said, I'm going to take a structural approach to these injustices and to these inequalities that we've had in education and in childcare and in economic development and police brutality and the disparities that we've lived with for so long, that I'm going to go after these problems in a very central kind of way to dismantle the structural apparatus within the system of government that perpetuates these problems, and not just talk about them and hope that they will go away. So I think it was a splendid speech. I think it was crafted very well. I think his delivery was superb. And even when he made a small error, he corrected himself. He was very sharp and had put that speech together very well, was very comfortable. And I felt he was right in my living room talking to me personally. That's how I felt about the speech. And I just thoroughly enjoyed having two women, one of whom, of course, was Black, up on that stand with him. That was such a historically profound statement. So the whole thing was engineered, in my opinion, very well, and he presented his points very well. I don't think he made any mistakes. His fact checks, most of that stuff proved out that he was articulating. So I felt really good and highly optimistic after hearing that speech. Now, I've been a part of conversations with people since then, and I'll share some of what others have shared about that, but I felt good about it.
Yeah. So as you look at the Lift Every Voice plan, and again, we're just talking about 100 days, and I think unfairly he was coming under criticism with just a snippet of appointments that were made early on. There's still hundreds of presidential appointments that need to be made, and very important appointments, especially when we talk about the judiciary and the like. How do you feel about his appointment of African Americans specifically, but not just African Americans, people who get it in terms of addressing the disparities in justice, addressing some of the systemic racial issues that we deal with in this country, whether they're Black or white or Latino, whatever their nationality or ethnicity is. How do you feel about the appointments that he's made?
Well, first of all, he has made of the 24 or so cabinet appointments, 6 of them have been African American. And that's roughly 24% of the total cabinet. Remember, 22% of his total vote came from African Americans, but 24% of his cabinet is African American. Of the 2,000 political appointees that he was able to make thus far, 18% of those have been African American. That's over 300 or so. Those are very high numbers compared to any administration that has preceded him. He's appointed more women than any of his predecessors have done. And I think every person in that cabinet, when they were vetted, part of the vetting, as I understand it, was this question of their commitment to racial equity and a sense of fairness and equity and justice for people in this country. So I think there are still some areas where we traditionally get left out, such as in the financial regulatory sector, things like in the Federal Reserve, the National Credit Union Administration, Comptroller of the Currency. Some of those areas we are still not getting appointments there, and I'm not sure we're getting appointments in the technological area. There's an excellent report, by the way, that the Joint Center for Political Studies has done on his appointments in the first 100 days, and I would recommend that people who are interested in this just Google that and consult it for a detailed breakdown. But his certainly his cabinet is an impressive one, the most diverse one that we've ever seen, second only perhaps to Barack Obama. His cabinet looks like America, and the people in it are all very, very talented people. The people who have been appointed in the Justice Department recently, the 2 appointees in the civil rights sector have been very important. And we have people in key positions, which we can talk about at another time. But he didn't just put people there for window dressing. The brother general who's appointed head of the Defense Department is an extremely well trained and competent brother who knows what he's doing. He's not just Black, but he has a sense of how to do something in the military. And he's also addressing the problem of racism in the military, because the truth be told, some of these white nationalists are inside the military. So this brother, this general, who's now the head of the Defense Department, is committed to rooting that out. So those kinds of things were vetted when these people, all of them, were submitted to the Senate for their confirmation. So I think we're on the right track with the appointment process, but we still have some things that need to be done. It is not yet complete, nor is it yet perfect, but we have done some unique and different kinds of things in the area of appointments. But I understand any criticism that people have, but I think all should be put in perspective about the issue of appointments. And it's just the first 100 days. But he's done marvelously well for the first 100 days compared to what presidents typically do in this country. He's done fabulously well as far as I'm concerned. But it's still a work in progress, to be sure. But I think he is to be commended for what he has done. At the same time, we should point out those places where there is additional work that could be done.
So you bring up past administrations, and one of the activist scholars who was highly critical of President Biden before he came into office, dubbed him to be a neoliberal, has seemingly in these first 100 days done an about face and changed his tune. And that's Dr. Cornel West, who has gone so far as to say he thinks Joe Biden has an even greater commitment to address white supremacy and systemic racism, and to really try to root it out at a level that President Obama never attempted and never addressed. What's your response to somebody like that, and people who feel that way, that even him talking about race is such a refreshing thing to hear from the president, when in some ways it was never spoken of in such glaring terms prior to President Biden saying what he's been saying?
Well, I appreciate Cornel West's observations. It just so happens that he was a student of mine when I was teaching at Harvard. I don't take responsibility for his successes or his lack of successes. I admire what he has, however, become. I take a slightly different approach to his critique of Obama, because I think that Obama, being the precedent-setting African-American president, did not have the same political capital that that Joe Biden has, because he was a black man constrained by a strong Republican presence that was committed to his eradication, as they very clearly stated. But the other thing is this: we're at a different time in history. One must always give credit to the historical forces on the ground that suggest to elected officials the directionality of their proposed policies and where they're leading the country. Biden didn't just happen to come upon the notion that it was time to do something about white supremacy. He came to that conclusion because the forces on the ground forced it. Whether he wanted to or not, he could not have gotten elected without taking that position, because the African American community, starting with that community, would not have supported him had he not been as aggressive as he wound up becoming in the fight that he was having within the party to just secure the nomination. The issue of race had become a paramount question for all of the candidates. None of them could have avoided that. It doesn't matter who it is, nor does it matter which of them would have been elected. But I think there's a sense of decency about Biden, and a sense of history and a sense of legacy, having been put in the position by Obama. I think he feels in his heart that he understands something about the issue and problem of race at a close-up level. And he has enough good common sense and political capital with certain segments of the white population that believes him to be a sincere human being. And I believe him to be a sincere human being. But I don't want to separate the sincerity of his humanity from the politics on the ground, because this is a question of power. This is a question of power and power politics, just like his predecessor was oriented in the other direction, because he was appealing to a different power base and a different political constituency that gave him the space to take those far right conspiratorial views that he articulated. Biden can do the opposite because the politics are different and the forces are very different. So I would always add to that, Dr. Cofield, that we cannot separate the political views of an elected official from the political reality that he or she faces on the ground when they are seeking the office, and then when they achieve the success in the office. But I also think that he believes that this is a historical moment, and that history has placed him in the position to be a transformative president, to make a difference in an issue that has plagued this country since its beginning. I really think he has a sense of that. And, you know, he's doing something that perhaps Barack would have loved to have done, but I don't think politically Barack could have done it, because he doesn't have the same political capital.
Well, I
think that I would have appreciated had Cornel said that in his comment. And I'm glad that he is supporting Biden. But Biden is now advancing political views that were formerly the views that were associated with the progressive left, because he realizes where we are in history, but he realizes that this country is in a very, very serious position in its own overall history. The totality of this country's history is at stake, as he talks about it, the challenge between democracy and authoritarianism. However flawed this country's democracy is, there's still a challenge with authoritarian regimes all over the world that is making mockery of the contradictions that they see in this country. And race is at the center of most all of America's contradictions. No matter how they are expressed in other terms, it always comes back to race, which it has never been able to resolve, acknowledge, and admit. So the fact that Biden is able to do that, I think is a marvelous and wonderful historical moment for all of us to look at how to be transformed by his political capital and his own human willingness to take on this issue and take us to the next level of where he can go. Now, whether he can do that alone is debatable, because I'm not sure that this is something that a president alone can do, because these are structural issues as well as attitudinal and religious and cultural problems as well. But it takes more than just a president articulating these views. You have to undo so much of the fundamental historical direction of this country and the way institutions in this country have operated to take advantage of people of color as well as other people. That you will have to undo some fundamental things in this country to change the structural racism that we call white supremacy that is deeply embedded in its fabric. So I think all of that comes into play. But I appreciate the fact that Cornell and others have given him at least some credit for what he has begun to do. But we still have a long ways to go, and the forces on the ground will still have to be active and alert and still hold him accountable. We cannot, because we like what we've seen in the first 100 days, we cannot go to sleep and think that the war is over.
Well, I do think, in fairness to Cornel West and his criticisms, he is, if nothing else, President Biden has learned a valuable lesson from President Obama, and that is, when you have a majority in the House and Senate, you better get through whatever you can get through. At the end of the day, you can
Absolutely.
Talk about bipartisanship, but Republicans have shown since the Obama administration their unwillingness to waver from
be bipartisan
politics. Yeah. And even though President Biden would consider himself a statesman, his years in the Senate, and there are still people in the Senate, including Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who was there when he was in the Senate. I think he's recognized the difference between offering a bipartisan plan and recognizing, you know what, they're just not going to go. So let me just go ahead and go forward. And I think, President Obama and the Democratic Party paid the price in the midterm elections, in the first midterm elections, because he was so bent on building bipartisanship that he gave up what political capital he had.
Yes, and I think that's a valid observation, and it's an appropriate criticism. It's a mistake that Biden has learned from, no doubt about that. And I don't think it's inappropriate of us to acknowledge that Biden has taken us places that Obama was unable to take us. Some of that could be that Biden was far more experienced and understands the devilish ways of the opposition much better than Obama did. After all, Biden's lifelong life as a seasoned politician, and Obama was brand new to this game. Yeah. So I don't have any problem observing Barack's mistakes, if you want to call them that. But I just think that we need to keep everything in perspective. And that's what I keep saying about the criticisms that people made of Obama, that things he could and could not do. There were limitations to his presidency. But some of us said from the outset, if you think that the election of Obama means the freedom of Black people, you are sadly mistaken, because he is not going to free Black people, because he cannot do so from the office of the presidency. But he was not able to go nearly as far as Biden has gone thus far with this attack on white nationalism and white supremacy, because white supremacy has revealed itself in a very different way during the Biden era that was not as evident during the era of Obama. It was still there, but it was just not as evident.
Yeah, I think to your point, absolutely, you're right. President Obama could not set us free. I think the criticism has been that he never stated that we needed to be set free, that these issues needed to be addressed, even if he didn't feel like he could address them. But
I slightly differ with that. I think I've heard him say that. He may not have said that as directly as some people would have preferred, but I have been in his presence and certainly heard him say it. And he didn't say as many things overtly in the public domain as many of us would have preferred, including myself, about race.
Right.
To be sure, we would have preferred that he be more direct about racial issues and racial questions. But he grew and he changed as well. And so we have to keep everything in perspective, and we have to accept what he did contribute, which was he laid down, I think, the gauntlet about white supremacy by proving that a black man can manage America and manage it well to the whole world. That was his single contribution, no matter what else he did or didn't do, Dr. Cofield. He did that. He destroyed the notion that black people could not manage a complex institution like the United States of America, because he did it and understood it when many of them did not and could not have managed it as well as he did. So I just want to give him his due and quit beating on him like a lot of people like to do. I just want to stop that. Sometimes we are too hard on ourselves. We should appropriately be critics of ourselves, but we should also point out the things that we did well despite ourselves. And I think that's one of those things. And I just want to give him credit. And with perhaps without Obama, there could not have been a Biden. So I just say, let's go, Biden. Let's learn from what you have learned, and let's keep fighting this battle, all of us together. And I'm glad that the left is now moving to be supportive, and hopefully we can stay in that lane. When Biden makes a mistake, I hope they can say he made a mistake as well, so that he can correct that mistake, and so that all of us can keep moving forward in the struggle.
Let's talk about the passage of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. How significant are these two laws to sufficiently attacking systemic racism? They're not going to dismantle it totally, but how significant are they in this fight against white supremacy and systemic racism in this country?
Well, I think they matter because you may not necessarily be able to change someone's mind immediately, but you can manage their behavior with the passage of that law, of the law on policing, which would indeed force accountability within police departments. See, I think we're getting a little bit confused with the term defunding the police. I think that perhaps causes more confusion than clarity. All of us want a reimagination of the police, and we want resources directed towards human and social services. But I don't think we want to eliminate the presence of police to serve our community. I don't think that's what most Black people want, at least as far as I have heard, that's not. We want to get rid of bad cops. We want to get rid of unaccountable systems. We want to get rid of the blue wall. We want to make sure that they can't just move from one employment to the next source of employment, and that their past does not follow them. The George Floyd the Justice and Police Act will do something about those conditions. Will it solve all the problems? Not all of them, because we just saw, for instance, the week of the Chauvin trial. Like Sharpton said yesterday, he's been to 4 more funerals since then. 4 more, that the police shootings have not stopped. That tells you that there's something else that is wrong with how police are chosen and selected and how they are held accountable. So the fact that we got a guilty verdict in the Chauvin trial was certainly something unique and inspired us all, but it alone will not solve all the problems. That act will just add one more nail in that coffin of a lack of police accountability. Now, the John Lewis Act is important because it compels, what it does is reimpose the need for pre-clearance before any state can change the voting conditions that affect Black people under the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which the Shelby Holden case dismantled. That's what's significant about it. So all of these voter suppression laws that are being passed in all these states like Georgia and Florida and Texas and wherever else they're coming about, if the John Lewis Act is passed, it would force all of those states to have to submit any such plans to the Justice Department before they actually are allowed to proceed. And that's the only constraint that we have over the ability of all these wild-eyed Republicans who are trying to reduce the ability of Black people to vote. Look, they know that 54% of the votes that happen in Georgia came from black folk. Without black votes, there would have been no success in Georgia. There would have been no Democratic control of the Senate. And they clearly looked at the results of that past federal election, which was not a fraud. Even they have to admit that, public protestations notwithstanding. But they definitely see that there is no future if black and brown and other people are allowed to openly vote in America. There's no future for the narrow way that they could see the world and the narrow class that they are trying to advance, whether it's an evangelical right or a conspiratorial right, or whether it's those far out extremist white nationalists. There's no future in America for that point of view. It's clear that there is a new coalition emerging of progressive minded persons who believe in the rights of all human beings and the respect for each group of people in this country. That's not who the quote unquote Republican Party is. And those laws that are being passed are attempted to constrain this new majority. Now, we've got to watch out for redistricting as well, Dr. Cofield, because that's going to be something, especially since we're hearing that like Texas gains 2 more seats. We've got to be careful how the redistricting of this Republican legislature is going to take place, because it's obviously they're not going to intend for that to help us. But I think those 2 pieces of federal legislation are very, very important in constraining and continuing to slow down the moving train of that right-wing direction that the Republican Party and others, or I should say the Trumpian Party and others, want this country to go in. I'm not sure what's going to become of what we call the Republican Party and whether it will even exist in the future as we know it, because it's not the same Republican Party that we used to know, what has been called the moderate Republicans that elected Ed Brooke, for instance, the first African American since Reconstruction in the U.S. Senate. That's not the Republican Party in this country anymore. So we're not sure what that's going to look like, but we need that law to constrain their desire to oppress and repress and eliminate our vote, and to constrain the direction, the progressive direction, that is the only thing that will salvage the future of this country. Because look, they're anti-democracy. Now, admitted there are flaws in our democracy, but it's the only thing we got to hold on to try to move towards a deeper and better humanity for us as Black people, as well as for other people in this country who believe in the humanity of everyone. I can be human and you can be human. That's all we're saying to everybody else. We don't need to try to destroy other people in order for us to be human and oppress them. But that's the position that they're taking, and that's got to be constrained. That's what those 2 laws will do. That's not the end of the story, but those are 2 very important tools. And I'm glad that Biden is, of course, supporting that. I just participated in a report card process the other day. 10% of the participants gave him an A after the speech. 20% gave him a C. 30% gave him a pass. 50% gave him an incomplete. Now, the incomplete was not a negative grade. It was just saying, I want to wait and see what's going to happen in the future. And there were 3 areas that came up that hadn't come up in his speech. One was this reparations question. Now, remember, reparations is now passed the House Judiciary Committee under Sheila Jackson Lee's leadership. It's going to come to the House floor for a vote for the first time in history. It got out of a committee. The second was the need to target more specifically where they keep using language like communities of color. Some people on the left and progressive want that to specifically say Black people when it does not. And the third is to get rid of the filibuster rule, because some people believe, and I think correctly so, that unless you do get rid of that filibuster rule, the Republicans are going to find a way. Mitch McConnell and his troops will find a way to completely constrain the progressive moving agenda of the Biden administration. Those were the 3 things that came up that they didn't feel that they had heard, which contributed to some of the incomplete. Somebody said an incomplete plus. I've taught for a long time. I never gave out an incomplete plus, but one of the participants gave him an incomplete plus. But that just shows you the diversity among some of the thinking activists across the country about whether is this for real, or should I just wait a minute and slow down? Let me see if this is really happening since it's never quite happened in this way before, can I trust it? That's a big question for some people. Can I trust this? I mean, Joe was considered to be a moderate. Now he's looking like a transformative president. This is the same guy. He looks like someone who used to be on the left or is on the left. He looks like Bernie, and he looks like Elizabeth and AOC and all those people. Can I rely on that? Or will he revert back when the pressure comes from the Republicans or Joe Manchin or some of those people? Will he revert back? So there's still some things that are sitting out there that people want to see more action for. But right now, he's heading in the right direction. He's made the right moves. We need those we need those pieces of legislation passed. We need the American Families Act passed, because therein is the education plan. Therein are the plans for child care, the plans for families, the American Jobs Bill. Do you know that for the first time, Pastor, there's $5 billion that's been earmarked to address the problem of community violence? I'm talking about black on black in our community, the shooting and the killings and the murders of our own people by our people. There is a $5 billion provision in the jobs and infrastructure bill just for evidence-based solutions to the violence in our communities. That's amazing. But that constituency lobbied very heavily with Susan Rice in the Domestic Policy Council, and they got that included. And he's running with that and supporting it. Now, whether the bill will get passed and whether people will try to remove that provision from it is a debatable issue. But the administration is solidly behind something like that. That's never happened before from any president. And that's a whole new arena that directly affects us. And when people find out about it, they say, huh? They're surprised. They never heard of anything like that before. But I know from the inside, those kinds of things have been at $45 billion to HBCUs. I mean, there's specific things, 15% increase in the SNAP provisions, which is the food stamp a component of all of this. The additional funds for education across the board at all levels. There's so many things that have never been proposed to help Black people coming out of this administration that you wake up and you say, hey, is this for real? Or is this a mirage? And that's why you got half the people saying, hey, I'm not sure.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield, and you're listening to The Choice, your member-supported public radio station, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial and ktsusradio.com. Let's go back just for a moment, Dr. Stanika. I'd like to talk about the investment in HBCUs. You have taught at predominantly white universities. You have taught at HBCUs. You're a proud HBCU alumni. Can you talk about the importance of HBCUs and the importance of this funding? I don't know if there's anybody who can do a comparative analysis as you can to talk about the importance of the HBCU in the life of African-American students. I remember reading Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath, and one of the things he talks about is that the best schools, and I'm paraphrasing now, those schools that we say are the best in the country may not be the best schools for you. And he talked about some of the cultural dynamics and the emotional dynamics and the other things that we need in our formative years that may not be available at the quote unquote top schools, but would be available for you at a state university. And I'm going to also add into that HBCUs and the like. Can you talk about the importance of that investment in HBCUs?
Well, I think it's finally recognizing the import of HBCUs on the total fabric of the country, which is not to say that it hasn't been recognized for some time, because certainly other presidents, Republican and Democrat, have come to realize that. But I think that what has come into a different kind of focus is that with the selection of Kamala Harris, who is a Howard graduate, and the mobilization of the Divine Nine, which are rooted in PWIs, that is predominantly white institutions, but have their origins, most of them, in HBCUs. There's been a different awareness on the part of the entirety of the African American nation about the relevance, significance, and importance of HBCUs in the life of our people. That the overwhelming majority of the leadership of our community has come from HBCUs. Our doctors, our lawyers, our engineers, our pastors, which is not to say that's the only way that we can produce human capital. I'm not suggesting that. What I am saying is that there is a nurturing environment in an HBCU that sees as its particular God-given mission for the private schools and even the public schools, the state schools may not overtly state it, but still believe that there's a God-given mission that we all must undertake to save ourselves and to produce people from their ranks who will be contributors to our human development as a community in this country. And so we, going back to the 19th century, when we started HBCUs in the first place, have always believed that HBCUs have a special place in our life, because that is also connected to the institution we know, which is at the root of our communities, which is our church. Our faith-based institutions and our HBCUs are like twins. They go together. That's where we've gotten, thank God, most of our clergy from. Though increasingly they're coming from other good places too. I recognize that. But there's something about what HBCUs do for our students, for our kids, for our community that has been recognized by us, that is now being recognized by the larger society. That's the significance to me of this earmarked allocation of the 45 billion. Is it enough? No, but it is enough for us to continue moving forward and coming back. And even places like Morris Brown, I'm sure you've heard that they got the reaccreditation. And part of how that happened, by the way, is one of our Greek letter organizations raised the money. I think over 500,000 or so, the 750,000 was needed to help them with reaccreditation. One of our Greek letter organizations, one of our Divine Nine, as we call them, helped to raise that money to get them to receive their reaccreditation from the Sachs agency that does that. So to me, the Biden commitment to do that is also a recognition that HBCUs played a special part in his life. The Delaware State University's president was the chair of his inauguration committee. He's someone that Biden has had a lifelong relationship with. He's had an emotional connection to that institution and to that president. And so for him, it's like the HBCU culture has had an impact on how he has seen the world and how he has tapped into his set of relationships with other persons. But I think that Obama made it clear during his presidency as well that HBCUs were an extraordinary resource for this country that we needed to support with the dollars to produce the human capital, because if we wanted a democracy to continue to grow as a democracy for all of us, the HBCU was a central element and component of that. So we are just extremely excited that the federal government is now taking HBCU contribution to another level, in addition to supporting other minority institutions in this country. Don't get me wrong. I think this administration wants to support all efforts that try to take historically marginalized people who have been left out of the story, to try to do what he can to help bring them into the story. And the HBCUs are on the cutting edge of that. I, of course, have taught at many of the great PWIs, predominantly white institutions, and I wanted to end my career at HBCUs, my own alma mater at Dillard, and then our beloved here in Houston, Texas Southern. And I'm just so happy and glad that I got a chance to do that. But I think we're on our way to a new place now, because increasingly the private sector is realizing the contributions of HBCUs in the STEM arena. For instance, the science, technology, engineering, and math arenas, not just the social sciences, but the technical and hard sciences as well. and there's more money every year that's coming into those departments. For instance, Dillard University produces more Black women in physics than any other institution in the whole United States. Dillard University, which is not a science school, more Black women in physics than anybody else. Shocking. So I think we're in for some new and some good times. I think we got a lot that we've got to focus on, but we've got 200 million shots. We got 1.8 million new jobs. 800,000 more Black people have now registered for the Obamacare process, for improving their medical insurance. That's an enormous step for us to have taken, and 4.5 million new small businesses have been impacted by all of the things that the Biden administration is putting forward. And there's a special program that's targeting them in the PPP this time. Unlike the last time, where those larger businesses were the primary beneficiaries, no, Biden said no. He changed that this time. So now businesses which are called enterprise business as opposed to sole proprietorships, which is 96% of our businesses. Now he says businesses with less than 20 employees will be targeted for this new process. And that's what he has actually done. And that is what is in motion presently. So it's very exciting to see the new initiatives that he has helped to facilitate and put on the table, because I think he genuinely believes it. But we've got to keep our eyes open. We cannot let our eyes deviate from the prize. Our own justice, our own liberation. We got to keep the Democratic Party accountable, because at the end of the day, we don't have permanent friends or enemies, but a permanent interest, our liberation. And we know historically we have been betrayed by both those political parties. So there's legitimate reason not to trust the political party process in America. But now is our moment to hold it to the fire, as we said 50 years ago in 1972 in Gary. Now is our time to do that again. And I'm anxiously looking forward to continue to working with this administration, when it does the right thing, to say it did a good thing, when it doesn't, to criticize it. So criticism with conditions, support with criticism, that's how we should see ourselves moving with this agenda.
Dr. Sanyika, thank you so much, man. Time always goes by so fast when we talk.
It's gone.
It's gone. It's gone.
Well, we should do the second 100 days later.
There you go. There you go. I appreciate you sharing your insights and your opinions and your facts regarding what we are looking at now and how we move forward. Please give your wife my regards, and we'll have you back on soon to continue.
Absolutely. And I look forward to being able to come back to the Good Hope.
All right. Yes, sir. A lot of the members look forward to it as well. I appreciate it. The late Vernon John said, if you see a good fight, get in it. I always add, if you don't see a good fight, start one. Dr. M. Tangalizi Sanyika makes a tremendous point. And I think it's important for all of us to remember the grades are varying depending on who's giving the grade for President Biden's first 100 days and what area they are grading. Most, both on the right and on the left, are giving him somewhere between an A- and an A+ in terms of his response to COVID-19. Some are giving him a lesser grade, again, depending on the area that you look at. But at the end of the day, 100 days is like a 100-meter race. It's just a sprint. It's just a start. But we know that in order for people of African descent to win the race of life, we've got to endure to the end. This is not a sprint. It's a marathon. So while we celebrate the start, we also need to be willing to hold accountable over the long haul. And so my hope and my prayer is that you are staying informed and staying engaged, not just on the national level, but in our state as well, as we look at redistricting. Remember, you have a large number of people who are moving from California into Texas. Number one reason, cost of living. But here's what's interesting. They are coming with what some would deem to be left-leaning political ideologies, but they're coming into a red state. Will they change the dynamics of our state in terms of their voting? I'm sure they will. But will that change the nature of representation of our state in the Congress? Probably won't, especially when you have a political party like the Republican Party in charge of redistricting. So we've got to keep our eyes and our ears open, and we've got to continue to fight the good fight. I'm Dr. DZ Cofield for Real World, Real Talk, signing off. Thank you for being with us on today. And if the Lord says the same and the creek don't rise, I'll be with you next week. Until next time, God bless is my prayer.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real World, Real Talk. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified of new episodes every week. Follow us via social media using the @RWRTDZ username on all platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To submit any comments, questions, sponsor opportunities, or future show suggestions, visit us online at rwrtdz.com or via email at info@rwrtdz.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope you've been inspired to be the change you want to see in the world today. Until next time, be real, keep it real, and stay real.